Hi there everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have 7 tips to share for effortless flower coloring for any occasion. I'll demonstrate this with the lovely Bouquet Ensemble from Altenew to make a gorgeous floral card. This video is part of the September 2023 Altenew Video Hop. Make sure you check out my crafty friends videos and interact with their channels. Doing so will get you an entry into the generous giveaway from Altenew. More details on that are in the description box, along with all the materials I used to make today's card. The focus today is the lovely Bouquet Ensemble from Altenew. This ensemble contains the Bold Bouquet bundle and the Essential Sentiments bundle. I'm starting with the stamp wheel and the stamp set in this ensemble. After positioning the image on my stamp wheel, I'll use limestone crisp dye ink to lightly stamp the outline of the image. The cardstock I'm using is Nina Solar White in 80 pounds. Next, I'll need the coordinating layering stencils for the Bold Bouquet image, and I'll pick my color palettes for this floral arrangement. As we move into the autumn months, I was inspired by the pale foliage of the hydrangeas in my garden. So I loosely based this bouquet on that color scheme. In order to plan out color placement, I'm using the Bold Bouquet stencils to establish a foundation of color. I'm using the sticky matte grid from the stamp wheel to temporarily position the cardstock and stencils together. I want the lily to be the highlight of this bouquet, so I'm setting a bright yellow foundation of butternut from the Fall Harvest Crisp Dye Ink set. I'm applying a very light wash to the center of the lily flower and the tips of the petals using a mini ink blending tool. This will give me the illusion that the petal is curling out and gives me an area of highlight in the center of the petal. As for the camellia and rose illustrations around the lily, I'm using pale mauve to apply a very light layer to bases of petals. I'll repeat the butternut and pale mauve layers on the second stencil. As a personal choice for my bouquet, I'm omitting the petal layers that fold over themselves on the third stencil. This way I have a highlight area on the flower for a little contrast. Then finally, for the foliage layers on the fourth stencil, I'm applying Silver Sage from the Frosted Foliage Fresh Dye Ink bundle to the base of the leaves again. If you want more vibrant palettes, you can certainly apply heavier colors of ink, but I want a muted feel to this bouquet. I can remove the sticky matte grid and clean off my stencils. I let the ink layers and outlines dry back overnight just as a preference, and life happens. After applying light layers of ink, I'll move on to adding details. For these smaller images, I'm using the woodless coloring pencils, so I can really add feathery strokes and movement throughout the bouquet. I like to pick a range of 3 colors, a mid-tone, highlight, and shadow. The mid-tone is what I want the overall color of the flower to be. In this case, I'm using maple yellow to get started with wispy petal veins. Generally, this mid-tone color is close or slightly darker than the ink blended layer. Then I'll move on to the shadow color colored pencils. For this lily, I'm using Heartbeat. This color is analogous to orange on the color wheel and darker than the mid-tone. Heartbeat is kind of like a deep red-orange, which is why I chose it. I'll apply light layers of this color where petals overlap and where I want to deepen petal ruffling. Then I'll move on to a lighter tint. I'll use fresh lemon to blend the previous 2 layers together. I'm a little less deliberate with this pencil, applying it where I feel there is too much of the white cardstock showing through. Before removing too much of the highlights, I'm going to move in the opposite direction and define petal edges. The color complement of the yellow hue is purple. So I'm using Midnight Violet to define the center of the flower, areas where the petal folds over itself, and where the petals overlap each other. The key is light layers of the complementary color. It is one of those miraculous tricks that really amplifies your coloring skills, and all you really have to do is strategically plan your colors. That's the end of the lily for now. We will finish all the detail layers as we build this bouquet. Next, I'll work on the camellia and rose images around the lily. The challenge with these flowers is I want a contrast between the bright yellow lily and these dark amethyst flowers. So again, I have my range of 3 colors to start: Rubellite, Midnight Violet, and Cosmic Berry as my tint, hue, and shade respectively. Just as before, I'll start with the mid-tone in Midnight Violet. I have to apply heavier layers of this color, and you'll see I will lose a lot of definition between petals. To help correct this, I'm also leaving more defined areas of white around the edges of petals. Then I'll move on to the shadow color Cosmic Berry to define petal edges and areas where petals overlap. One challenge I know I face is not applying enough of the darker colors to define petals. Sometimes it helps taking a step back and observing the entire bouquet as a whole after applying layers. This helps judge your color saturation so that you know where to add contrast to the bouquet. Then once I'm happy with the depth of the layers, I'll add the Rubellite tint to the tips of the petals. So here's an example of not applying enough color. I'll go back with my mid-tone pencil to really deepen this camellia. As I was coloring, I noticed I wanted an even deeper shade between petals and defining petal folds. Instead of adding black or the yellow complement, I decided to add sapphire for a crystalline glow to the petals. I'll reference the outline image often to make sure I'm defining petal edges. Then I'll repeat the coloring steps with my purple family of colors to color the bouquet. Leaves are the frame to your flowers. I like to almost blur the leaves by making less of a color contrast. The colors I picked are grass field, moss, and mangrove root to get a deep yellow-green range. As I apply the mid-shadow and tint, I'm less concerned about defining veins and more concerned about adding movement to leaves with feathery strokes. So I'm starting with moss all around the bouquet. Then I'm defining the base of leaves and leaves that tuck behind flowers with mangrove roots. Then to remove a bit of the white cardstock, I'm using grass field to saturate the leaves. I didn't like the brightness of the leaves, it felt a little too spring for me, so I'm using color complements again to mute back the leaves for a late summer feeling. Light washes of ruby red between leaves and at bases of leaves that are behind flowers not only help push leaves back, but also bring flowers forward. I'm loving the way this turned out. I'm going to add the stamens on all the flowers in this bouquet. I'm doing this with the detail nib in Islands of Fiji dual tip pens. Again, I am referencing the outline image to get the lines as close as I can to the original image. I'm not so concerned with the camellia and roses, but I am trying to get as close as I can for the filament in the lily. You'll see why in a moment. I colored this image on 80-pound white cardstock, so I could easily use my precision blade to fussy cut this arrangement, leaving a narrow white margin. Then I'll use the Bold Bouquet embossing folder to add texture to this bouquet. The outline image matches the embossing folder, creating a beautiful and professional feeling focal element. Before I use the embossing folder though, I'll break apart this bouquet so I can get these 3 segments. I love rearranging grouped images like this to really stretch out paper crafting supplies. Then with the embossing folder, I'll press and add texture to the segments of this bouquet. The filament lines of the lily are also embossed in the embossing folder, so that's why I tried to get those to match as closely as I could with the dual tip pen. Before arranging this bouquet, I'll make my sentiment. I started with the U stamped sentiment. I stamped this in Obsidian Pigment ink and stacked 3 layers of cardstock for this chipboard piece. In the lovely Bouquet Ensemble is the Essential Sentiments bundle. I used the hot foil plate and a Spellbinder's opaque white foil to add this Hello Friend sentiment to black cardstock. The hot foil plate coordinates with the Essential Sentiments die to cut all the sentiment strips in one go. I put the hello and you sentiments together for this unique hello card statement. I extended the black strip with a fragment of another sentiment strip so that the space is fairly symmetrical. I foam mounted the floral layers to a panel of white cardstock. Then I added the sentiment strip. I used the Stampwheel stage and a T-square ruler to ensure the black sentiment strip was perfectly horizontal on my card front. To embellish this card, I used both jet black and pure white ink sprays to add dreamy dots all over the card background. Those are a few of my tips on creating a lovely floral bouquet. Don't forget this is just one of the videos on the Altenew Video Hub. Be sure to check out the description box for my friends' videos, as well as the materials I used to make this card. Thank you so much for visiting my channel. Please give my video a like and subscribe if you're new here. I'll see you again very soon.